Hello again. This time I have another witch's story. They are my favourites. This one is Grumblog by Jane Garrett. There was once a beautiful land which was terrorised by an evil witch. Her name was Grumblog, and she could not bear anything that was peaceful, happy or beautiful. It made her boil over with rage. Her eyes would send out showers of red sparks, and thick black smoke would pour from her ears. Can you imagine that? Thick black smoke. The people in the village near the forest where she lived were terrified. They thought a volcano was erupting. Grumblog's forest was a dangerous place. People entering it in search of blackberries or wild mushrooms seldom disappeared forever. So a ripple of fear spread through the village one morning when a really loud and dreadful volcano rage from Grumblog was followed by an eerie silence. All the birds stopped singing. Nothing moved except the wind in the trees. The witch had got extremely cross at the sight of a blackbird singing to a pair of courting squirrels. Spitting with a terrible rage, she stirred her cauldron savagely, and then looking up at the cloud of evil-smelling steam, she hissed, "Fur and feathers be no more, turned to stone by Grumblog's law." In that instant, the whole forest fell silent. The villagers were so scared they packed up their things and fled across the hills. I would too, wouldn't you? In the forest, all of the wild creatures had been turned into stone. Tiny statues of mice and rabbits and deer stood with surprised looks on their faces. By the side of the path, when the sound of all the frightened people running away faded, all that could be heard was the wheezing of Grumblog crackling over the success of her spell. It did not take long, however, for Grumblog to discover that she had made a serious mistake. The forest was more beautiful than ever before, flowers blossomed where the rabbits and deer used to graze, and everything was quiet and peaceful around the witch's dark and gloomy home, where she sat, thinking up new ways of making everybody miserable. Grumblog flung down her book of spells in disgust. "This is no good at all," she roared. "Bring me whirlwinds and thunderstorms, typhoons and tornadoes." And she kicked the sleeping cauldron with her boot. Bang! But the storms she unleashed made the forest fresher, greener and lovelier than ever before. And as she stumped through the deserted forest and the empty countryside, the cottage gardens with their bright flowers seemed to mock her. Grumblog went purple with rage. Black trails of smoke curled up over the treetops as she marched back to her damp, wet home. Plunging her broomstick into the cauldron, she stirred the magic brew as hard as she could and cursed the flowers with the most fearful spell she knew. "Cottage gardens, hedgerow weeds, live up to your names in deeds." No one knows whether Grumblog actually intended the spell to work out the way it did, but immediately all the plants began to change. Dandelions and tiger lilies turned into real lions and tigers, snarling crossly at each other. Elephant grasses grew greyer and fatter until they became a herd of real elephants. Imagine that in your back garden. The monkey puzzle tree dissolved into a chattering colony of apes, and cows emerged from cowslips, and snapdragons grew into real dragons that set fire to the treetops as they flapped overhead. This is not looking good, is it? Then all of the plant animals started chasing each other. The elephants stampeded through the cows, the lions and tigers fought the dragons. It was total pandemonium. It was chaos. Grumblog was absolutely delighted. "Just what the doctor ordered," she said. The witch sat back and watched as the animals crashed through the woods, tearing up the grass, burning the leaves and barking and snarling at each other. She roared with laughter as they fought and croaked, "Bravo!" as they knocked over bushes and fences, broke windows and generally made a terrible mess. Then Grumblog froze with fear, for she suddenly realised that the roar of the dandelions and the wild trumpeting of the elephant grasses were coming closer and closer and closer. The thudding of heavy feet and the crashing of branches got louder and louder, and the plant animals were heading straight for her. Hey! Grumblog dashed back to her hove and managed to hide just as a huge, angry herd of elephants, lions, tigers and dragons came smashing their way into her clearing, snapping her broomstick underfoot and sending her precious magic cauldron flying. Yes! From the moment that evil-smelling liquid from the broken cauldron seeped into the ground, the forest began to change. Grumblog's wicked spell was broken, and not only that spell, but all the evil spells she had ever done. The stone birds and animals dotted about the forest came to life again and carried on exactly as though nothing had happened, and the plant animals changed back into their true form. Suddenly, the villagers couldn't remember why they had left their beautiful valley in the first place. Filled with gladness, they packed their bags again for the journey home. But what they saw when they got there took their breath away. Their lovingly tended gardens lay in ruins, and their favourite flowers were scattered across the countryside. It took them weeks and weeks and weeks to tidy up the mess. As for Grumblog, no one ever discovered what became of her. Once her magic powers were destroyed, she vanished from the forest forever, leaving the land in peace at last. And that is the end of that story. And it was absolutely brilliant. I think so. Yes. Oh, till the next time, see you, kiddlies. Bye.